The symbol is called an E mark, and it was part of the solution to a problem that they were having back in the 1970s. Because over the past few decades, food and drink had shifted over to going pre-packaged. Everything was being produced on big production lines and sent out to shops in these packages. You would think that it would now be easier than ever to hit the quantity on the packaging precisely. If it says 500 grams, you should be able to just, I don't know, set the machines to make 500 grams of pasta and put them into the bags, and that's all it. But you only need 1 or 2 pieces of pasta to not quite go the right way at the right time, and you're going to end up with a package that could be a few grams either side of that. At the time, the law said that if a package says 500 grams on it, there better be at least 500 grams in that package, or else we've got a problem. You can check for these variations at the end of a production line, and they do. They use machines called dynamic check weighers, which can weigh products while they're in motion going through a conveyor belt. But it's not an efficient way to do business to constantly be making these packages, weighing them, and then having to redo some percentage of them because they were slightly under a certain weight threshold. As consumers, it's easy for us to say that food manufacturers should just overfill the packaging. You know, if it says 500 grams, maybe they should target 510 grams. But it's important to remember that these rules are going to apply to everyone. They're not just for big multinational billion-dollar food companies. They're for literally anyone who is selling pre-packaged food and drink in any context. So a fair solution was needed. One thing you could do is to have a sort of informal approach to this. Maybe the people responsible for trading standards could just come out and say, well, you know, we're not going to worry too much if it's a few grams here or there. But the problem with that was that European integration was also starting to get going in the 1970s. And if this whole idea of Europe being a single market was going to work out, you couldn't really have all these different weird, obscure, informal arrangements. So what they decided to do was to replace the old minimum quantity system with the average quantity system. There are 3 rules of the average quantity system. Rule number 1 is that you have to be hitting on average what it says on the package. Rule number 2 is that almost all your packages must fall within a certain threshold, which is called the tolerable negative error. There is a bit more detail to it than almost all, but I'm not going to get into that because it looks like this. And rule number 3 is that no package can be underweight by more than twice the tolerable negative error. Sometimes customers will get slightly more than what they paid for, sometimes they'll get slightly less. It'll all cancel out and everyone's happy. So with this knowledge, I am now really curious about products I've been buying. Like, if I weigh them, will they fall within the tolerable negative error? So I'm going to save you the job of running to your kitchen and getting the weighing scales out, and I'm going to go and do that for you. Let's go. Once I get past the tripod. Hello, I'm now sitting in front of the sofa. Now there are going to be some limitations to what we're about to do here. First of all, because while these scales are fairly precise, they have 2 decimal places on them. They haven't been calibrated to industrial standards or anything like that, so I can't really vouch for how accurate they are. Secondly, we're not going to be taking as many samples as they would in the real world if they were actually testing this. But luckily this is only for a YouTube video, so none of that matters. I do have a bunch of pasta packages, a little multi-pack of those little cereal boxes, and a multi-pack of skips. So let's weigh them, let's find out how they stack up against the average weight system. Hello, it's now tomorrow and I have crunched the numbers from my incredible testing. So on the right here we have the nominal weight, which is the weight that's listed on the packaging. I did end up finding while doing this that each of the cereals in the pack of cereals actually had a different weight because they're different cereals. So this is an average, but I did treat them all differently and work it out separately. So first of all, this number, if any packages are below this number, then it's an instant fail. So did I find any packages underneath this number? No. The next test is based on the tolerable negative error times 1. So pretty much all of the packages need to be above this weight. Did I find any that were outside of this threshold? Yes, actually I did. There was 1 package in the skips that was below the tolerable negative error. So it wasn't an instant fail, but it was kind of a, you get marked down for it kind of thing. And the third and final test is whether the average weight across all of the packages is equal to or greater than the nominal weight which is printed on the outside of the packaging. And for skips, it actually wasn't. So if this was a proper test done with industrial equipment across a proper sized batch, and not just 6 is not enough, then skips would have actually failed. I guess shout out to Kellogg's, because they were 2.5% above what it says on the outside of the packaging, so you're actually getting a little bit more than you paid for there. And these are the raw results across all the packages. You can see that Skips is dragged way down by that one package I measured, which was so low that it was outside the tolerable negative error. I must once again state that this is not a proper test. I didn't use industrial calibrated scales. I'm literally just a guy doing it in his living room with a multi-pack that he bought. This is not how you would actually have to test for this stuff. If you bought a bag of Skips, you might have a completely different result. If you bought any of these products, you might have a completely different result. But yeah, Skips didn't come out of this looking good, and the other products by and large did. So when you see the E mark on product packaging, it means that that product is using the average weight system. But the E mark is a voluntary thing to put on product packaging. You can use the average weight system and not put an E mark on there. So why do so many products have an E mark on the packaging when it's not actually required to put it there? The reason is because this is a system that's used and recognized across the European Union. So if you put that on your packaging, it certifies that you are using the European Union's average weight system. And that way you can sell to all the countries of the EU without having to worry about any kind of national legislation around weights and measures. But of course, Britain is no longer in the European Union, so why do we still have it on all of our products? I didn't get a firm answer to this, but I would guess that it's a mixture of a lot of companies still export stuff to Europe, so it's still worth having an E mark on there. A lot of companies will have unified packaging designs across different countries and regions, and they'll just always put an E mark there because there's no reason not to. And there's probably also a lot of companies that are still putting E marks on things because it's just how it's always been done. I had a theory that if I looked at products that were less likely to be exported to the European Union, those would be the ones that would be most likely to not have an E mark on them. But instead, what I found was just this kind of patchwork of inconsistencies. At Sainsbury's, I found that you can get a 100-gram pot of Sainsbury's brand coffee and it has an E mark on it. But if you get the 200-gram one, it doesn't have an E mark on it. It does seem like the packaging has a slightly different design, so maybe one of these is a newer update of the packaging, and maybe over time either the E mark will be on both or gone from both. But yeah, that's what the E mark means. So when you see an E mark, you know that it is using the average weight system. If you don't see an E mark, you don't know what it's using, but it probably is still using the average weight system anyway. In any case, that is what the symbol means, and now you'll never unsee it. Bye.